Today we're talking about more information from HiRez Expo, and more specifically most of the information is about Heimdallr, because on the expo itself there was a panel which Triple Charged visited, so big thanks to him for taking pictures of all the slides and everything, and there they discussed how Heimdallr was designed. And there's a lot of interesting stuff here. I'm gonna go through this in detail, but if you are so far disappointed that he's a hunter, then this information may be for you, because apparently he's not just a hunter, he's more than a hunter, and the warrior thing that people were talking about initially isn't even that wrong. But we'll get to that a little bit later. We're gonna go into all the details about him, but this is definitely something to be excited if you were not that excited from beforehand. The presentation in some ways reads a little bit like a closer look that HiRez does for new gods, but it's not quite the same, and they discuss some more overarching ideas for god design as well. So we're just gonna go through that and then add some additional information. The whole thing is called The God Process, taking Heimdallr from idea to reality. We're starting with the lore. Heimdallr is known as the Shining One, bestowed with incredible sight and hearing. He can hear grass growing from 100 miles out and see even further. This hearing also allows him to hear scholars converse, giving him untold wisdom. Heimdallr is the guard of the Bifrost Bridge, a bridge made of rainbows that connects the Norse world with the mortal realm. He watches from his cabin where he brews his meat. He also has a connection to man, who are often called Heimdallr's sons. Heimdallr signals the beginning of Ragnarok, blowing the Gjallarhorn to warn of the incoming giants led by Loki. Loki and Heimdallr fight to the death at this bridge. Thematic pillars, visuals, shining armor and Viking. Known as the Shining One, his armor should be clean and masterfully crafted. Ornate engravings, fine leather and fur, and gold highlights. Norse Viking. While some Norse gods take aspects of this theme, Heimdallr goes all in. We're gonna get to the visual representation of him a little bit later, because there are a lot of slides here about that specifically. Gameplay theme. Knowledge and foresight to leverage his strength and arsenal. Heimdallr has a variety of weapons at his disposal. Heimdallr would not be Heimdallr unless these were displayed prominently. Axe throwing, a space to explore unique basic attacks. Vision as a resource buff. Personality, warm, strong sense of honor, protective. Heimdallr often retires to his cabin and makes mead, a home to share stories over a pint. Threaten his guard and he turns serious and firm in his resolve. Perspective, all-knowing, all-seeing, reliable. Others see Heimdallr as a vessel of knowledge, knowing he uses this knowledge to keep the realm safe for all. The god's schedule. Where does Heimdallr fit? He is the HRX reveal god who is planned to be a community requested character, and this was concluded from watching community discussion over time. He was also planned to be a physical hunter, because Olron as a mage ADC delayed another hunter slightly, so now it's time. Heimdallr also complements upcoming gods well, because HiRez tries to alternate in visual diversity, gameplay diversity, and community requests versus surprises. The last one here was Yemoja, who was more of a surprise, and she was a female guardian. Now we have Heimdallr, who is very community requested and a male hunter. Then afterwards we have someone who is not completely named yet, but again I think this is probably going to be Mulan, and that's currently labeled as a surprise and unknown. And then we have Baba Yaga, who is again a community requested god, who is female and will be a magical character. Just interesting side note that we already know that she will be a magical character, though that seemed rather obvious. And then the new character also needed to complement the story. They needed someone to defend the pantheons against Persephone's plan to dethrone the gods. Establishing gameplay goals and theme. Heimdallr, a fresh take on the hunter class. He's the first hunter with a hit chain. Additionally, HiRez is experimenting with wider basic attacks, cleaving ranged attacks, and slow but hard-hitting attacks. So this is pretty huge. He's gonna have a slower basic attack, which, as far as I understand it, will on one hand affect his attack speed, which will not be the usual, and on the other hand apparently also the projectile speed of the attack itself. And that whole thing will be cleaving, making that his primary clear option this way, which is very, very unusual. It's basically a built-in golden blade, or what we used to have a throwing dagger once upon a time. But now it's built in the kit and it seems to be permanent, but in return the basic attacks are slower in other ways, but they're also wider, meaning he will probably be in some ways easier to play and feel different, maybe not be that typical for most hunter players and maybe more accessible for people who typically don't play hunters. What HiRez wanted to avoid with this design was a typical pattern of having a stim or a steroid, a wave clear and a movement ability. So he lacks a distinct attack speed or power stim ability, and he doesn't have a typical wave clear ability, and instead his wave clear has a more basic attack focus, especially in early game. And his movement ability requires planning. He lacks on-demand instant movement. It makes sense from the angle that one of his abilities will be used for the Gjallarhorn, one of them will be used for the sword, and one of them will very likely be used for the Bifrost, so there's only so much room to even fit all these concepts in, and that makes it very, very interesting. I think we will see something very unusual here. Brainstorming and concept. What does Heimdallr actually do? For brainstorming, we had multiple meetings with departments across the company, allowing each group to bring ideas. A mixture of freeform and guided brainstorming. For Heimdallr, we know we wanted a sword and horn ability, as well as we wanted to bring the Bifrost in. Weirdest idea, Heimdallr summons the Bifrost and everyone appears on it in a SMITE cart. They play bumper cars, taking damage if they fall off the bridge. I think that would have been fantastic, but probably horrible for balance. These types of ideas are encouraged. Even if not feasible, sending players to a different location because of the Bifrost is interesting and can be built on, and I honestly think they kind of did that. I think you kind of picking out players and put them into the Bifrost and fight them there somehow. We take these ideas and create a few kits around popular themes, utilizing ideas from these brainstorms. We pitch these kits to other guard designers, helping narrow the focus towards one kit, sometimes mixing and matching elements. The guard designer then polishes the single kit to present to the team. Full-scale development and iteration. Heimdallr's first test. First guard tests often feature heavy placeholder artwork and functionality. Einherjar Chark, or however you say that, made a perfect placeholder. Wielding an axe and having a Viking motif served him well. That is, by the way, what broke Chark's animation briefly, that was kind of connected to that. Heimdallr's sword was the sword in the stone for a while. The horn sound was actually Apophis' intro sound. We also learned the sound is global, even when hooked up in a different place. Everyone in the playtest knew when he blew the Gjallarhorn. This is something we kept slightly. His final sound has a larger attenuation volume than normal, so I'm guessing it's probably going to be possible to hear it further across the map as well. Often we house rule mechanics to get earlier test results than normal. His first ability could sometimes double hit. If we hit at an unintentional time, we would intentionally miss. Not saying how, but players would often fall outside the map due to his abilities. This led to many instances of resetting. Again, I think that's happening when you put enemies on the Bifrost. Even without full functionality, these playtests are available for duration. Polish, Heimdallr's current state. As we're here discussing Heimdallr, we have people working on bringing him to life. Final animations, timings, balance, QA and bug fixing all continue. Still have more to do when HRX is over before his reveal show. Polish continues up to and through reveal show as players get their hands on him. And here we can see the first picture of an early version for him, where it was basically his model with Chark's rig and a bit messy overall. Release. Heimdallr's future. Once released, a god is perfect with no flaws or issues, balance included. That's of course a joke. We'll continue getting feedback to ensure he has met his goals and is up to our quality standards. PTS feedback helps guide immediate actions if needed, or more long-term planning. Persephone, for example, got better feedback on her death state during PTS, with more long-term plans to resolve in a future patch. Balance, of course, is always a thing to look toward. Win rate at launch is for the skill floor, and win rate over time for the skill ceiling. General play reception and feedback. as well as identifying ways to improve gameplay for Heimdallr as well as counterplay options for opponent. There are some upcoming slides still for the visual design, but before we get to that, I quickly want to go to the questions that were at the end and go through those and then come back to that. So the most important answer from this is that apparently he is not necessarily a hunter in a classic sense. We already can kind of tell from his basic attacks, but also the fact that he will have warrior base stats and abilities. So in a way he's maybe more of a warrior with ranged basics, but he falls under the hunter class. But I think this is a good bridge basically between a full-on hunter when Olorun was also a magical hunter and something new. And I really like these like unusual explorations. Outside of that, Ponpon also revealed the first part of his kit for us, and that is the passive. When Heimdallr loses vision of an enemy guard, he maintains vision for 4 seconds. This is for all sources like wards, Nua ult or normal vision, and it also includes stealth. This is partially because he is supposed to be a direct counter to Loki due to their rivalry. In a way, I think you can kind of imagine this a little bit like Erendite, like the effect that you get when you use it there, but not quite the same. It's more of a extended vision duration, and it kind of entices you to ward as well, because it will especially help you detect stealth guards wherever they go, because they stay revealed for 4 seconds while rotating around all the time, making it very, very hard for them to really go anywhere. And not getting away from him with stealth is obviously very scary too. He can still see you for 4 seconds every time. But that's not all. The passive has an even more interesting part. He gains power based on the number of enemies visible on his map. So the more wards you have on the map, the stronger he is, and your team can help you with that, because you will constantly have more vision on the map that way, see more enemies, get more power. I think that sounds like a super interesting and unique approach to encourage people to ward through getting them an advantage that they can directly feel. Now let's look at the artworks that we have for Heimdallr as well. First we have the early exploration sketches and notes establishing the right direction and feel. It's kind of hard to make out because the quality unfortunately isn't that high, but we can see that there are 3 or 4 different versions of Heimdallr here. The first one being with relatively low amounts of armor and not even a helmet, and you can't even tell much about the head. The second version with more of a beard and a longer hairstyle going on and a little bit more armored, and the third version wearing his helmet and having big shoulder pads with these horns on them and just overall being a lot more geared up. The next slide is developing proportions and features, exploring physical features. Here you can see different variations of his beard and some variations in the tattoos as well, I think. Though it's a little bit hard to tell what exactly is going on. Mostly minor details in my opinion. Next we have silhouette exploration, finding shapes and breaks in silhouette to create iconic shapes and look. So I guess that makes him more recognizable. And here they especially tested different helm options, so that will definitely be something that helps you recognize the character overall. Then we have weapons and gear, exploring and developing weapons and equipment. And here we can simply see 4 different versions of the Gjallarhorn. Then on the next picture we can see this version of the Gjallarhorn being put on his back to give us a little bit more of an impression of what they would look like in game if they were on the character, I guess. And then we have color schemes, exploring fitting color schemes for Heimdallr's look. Again, relatively hard to tell here. The first theme seems to be mostly bronze, gold, silver-ish. The next one includes a few more black elements and red elements and golden ornaments, I think. And the third one is more of a silver-white overall. And the horns, I think, look more like actual horns in this case. Next, refining of equipment, costume, and equipment. Yes, it is actually worded like that. Working with the design team to create weapons that work for abilities. And here we can see the axe a little bit more, we can see the horn again, and we can also see different versions of the sword. And the axe looks a little bit different now here, it has some frozen effects and glowing effects as well. And then we have final, polish, and rendering. Rendering the final design and defaults for base Heimdallr and his gear for modeling. Not much info on this slide, we can just see which sort they ended up choosing. And then we have the guard recolors, exploring color options for recolor, mastery skin, etc. I think I don't need to go through these in detail, again, just different color tests that they did. And then we have the final base and color picks, choosing the final color options for recolor and mastery skin version. HiRez posted a version there of that that's in part a little bit clearer, so you can kind of see both. And I think especially the recolor turned out pretty nice. They actually implemented a lot of this black-red theme that we saw showing up throughout the concepts over and over. And it seems to work pretty well, so far at least. And there's all the visual design options they presented, but there was also a leaked artwork, which is probably going to be his in-game card art, where we can see him a little bit better. So there's quite some material for him already. And honestly, I think he looks really cool, and I think it's gonna look really cool when he throws these big X's in-game as well, especially if they're actually wider and everything too. I'm really looking forward to that, and I really hope that he turns out nicely. Now that's the information for today, but I potentially have some upcoming stuff for the other guards in the next days, so feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell if you haven't yet, if you want to stay updated on the new guard news, the HRX news, or anything else regarding SMITE really. And with that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope to see you all for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.